Hello, hello. All right. So, move my desk around here. My little tiny end table desk. Matthew 26. We got halfway through a section where Jesus is being arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane. And so it says in verse 51, suddenly one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. But Jesus said to him, put away your sword in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Or do you think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he will provide me with more than 12 legions of angels? How then could the scriptures be fulfilled that it must happen thus? In that hour Jesus said to the multitudes, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to take me? I sat daily with you teaching in the temple, and you did not seize me. But all this was done that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples forsook him and fled. It's interesting that people often quote the verse, where Jesus tells them to sell stuff and go and acquire a sword. And, in reality, I think Jesus is speaking of the fact that there's going to be persecutions coming. And I don't think he has any problem with people defending themselves. But we also see that Christianity was never supposed to be a violent thing on the offense. Again, while I don't think God has any problem with someone defending their lives and taking care of themselves, what we find is religions like Islam, they grew at the edge of the sword. That was the idea, was they swept through nations and converted, without much choice, entire nations to Islam. In the golden age of Islam, and they spread quickly by the sword. Now, Jesus here tells Peter, we know, to put away his swords. Because if Jesus really needed Peter to defend him, Jesus could take care of himself. He talks about 12 legions of angels. So that'd be about 72,000 angels. Now, if you're familiar with the story of the Rabshakeh, when Sennacherib came and besieged Jerusalem in the times of Hezekiah, we find one angel there killing 185,000 soldiers. And these were the mighty soldiers it mentions. It wasn't just like, the cook. it was the real deal soldiers. So 72,000 angels could probably do quite a number on the bad guys. I think a big takeaway from this, not necessarily the straightforward account of what's going on here, but what we find is Peter trying to hack off people's heads with a sword. Let me take a look here. Peter's the one who said, if all are made to stumble, I won't stumble. And Jesus told him, yes, you are going to stumble, Peter. Now, Luke's gospel, Luke being a doctor, I think we understand that Luke is into details. Let's put it that way. And it says here in Luke's gospel that he struck him and he cut off the right ear of the servant. Now, what's fascinating about that is we're rolling the dice here and playing the odds that Peter is an average man, which would mean he's right-handed. Now, if you have your right hand and you cut off someone's right ear, well, the only way for you to do that is to cross over and whack him that way, or more likely, he came up from behind and hacked the guy in the ear. And chances are he wasn't aiming for the ear, but he still had a lot of eye boogers because he had been napping, and so maybe his aim was a bit off. I will say this, though. We see a pattern with Peter, and I think we'll continue this pattern more in the future. But there's a wonderful pattern that I've done whole full length sermons on, with just following some of the actions of Peter on the night of Jesus's arrest. And the first thing you find is this sense of security. It's truly arrogance. Even if all should stumble, I will not stumble. I just quoted on Sunday, and I don't have the words word for word in front of me, but Richard Sibbes, a Puritan preacher, called the Heavenly Doctor, because he was just such a heavenly guy. But in short, he made the comment that God will sometimes let us stumble in sins. He'll let us fail so that we don't become overcome by a greater sin. And he gives the examples of pride and security. This is that security Dr. Sibbes is talking about. This idea of, if all are made to stumble, I will never stumble. Well, pride comes before destruction and a haughty spirit before the fall. And so here we have Peter thinking he's going to be so great, that he would never fall, that he'd never stumble. And then when Jesus goes to pray, which we were reading about back in like verses 36, to 46, could you not watch with me 1 hour? He says, he finds him sleeping and said to Peter, could you not watch with me 1 hour? Mister, I'd never stumble. Yeah, but you can't even pray, Peter. You think you're not going to mess up, and yet you couldn't even pray with me. And as often we find in a season where we've got this pride and security and a prayerlessness, when the poo finally comes and hits the fan, well, we act out in the flesh. And we try in and of our own strength to go and solve the problem. And it usually results in us hacking someone's ear off from behind. And it probably never needed to happen. Now we're going to find that Jesus is going to heal this guy. Oh, excuse me. He's going to heal him, actually put his ear back on. So that's kind of cool. But deep down, we need to be continually examining ourselves. Because Peter obviously didn't realize he was in a dangerous place when he said that all might be made to stumble except me. Peter probably didn't see the consequences of his prayerlessness when Jesus asked him, why can't you pray with me 1 hour? And Peter obviously thought he was doing the right thing when he whipped out his sword and he tried to fix the problems that were surrounding him. But if you back up, at least for Peter, he obviously wasn't going to stop the crucifixion. But for Peter's sake, he should have stopped it back at humility. He should have stopped it back at praying. These are the things that led up to this event, of which it's not over. As we know, he has yet to deny him 3 times. He'll even curse. We'll get there. I don't want to teach future text today, but the best translation I have come up with what Peter says before his 3rd denial is, I'll be damned if I know that man. And that's not a pretty place to be. And so we'll continue to pick these up along the way. This progress of Peter, pride and prayerlessness, followed with this trying to do stuff in the flesh by the sword, which will ultimately end up in him uttering words that are going to crush his soul. And yet, let's not forget what Luke wrote. Peter, I have prayed for you. And when you return, strengthen your brethren. I have prayed for you that your faith will not fail. When you return, strengthen your brethren. God already knows. God already knows your foolishness and the mistakes you're going to make. But why not learn from Peter? And let's avoid a few of these mistakes ourselves. Amen? Amen. Today's Tuesday. If you know of any teenagers in the Yakima Valley, send them over to my house tonight. Doors open 6:30, Bible's open at 7. Tomorrow night is prayer at Revival Church. Can you not pray with him for 1 hour? Make it there. Ask a friend for a ride. Offer a friend a ride. Don't even offer. Just pick them up. Throw a bag over their head and toss them in the back of your van. I think if you're taking them to prayer, it's okay. I'll see you guys around.